I've always been the type of person who loves a good deal, but Black Friday shopping was a whole new level of crazy. It was my first time going to shop for Black Friday, and I was so excited, even though I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I was 17, just starting to drive on my own, and my friends warned me about how insane it could get. So, when I decided to go, I didn't think anything too crazy could ever happen. I just wanted to grab a few deals, maybe get some clothes, and head home. But man, was I totally wrong. I remember it was around 11 p.m. when I got to the mall. It was busy, but not overwhelmingly so. People were rushing around, their arms full of shopping bags, the stores buzzing with energy. It felt good to be out on my own, like a small act of rebellion. Something exciting. When I first noticed him, I was on my way into one of the main stores, trying to find a good deal on jackets. He was tall, probably in his mid-30s, and looked a little weird. I wasn't trying to be paranoid, but I couldn't help but feel like there was something wrong. He made my skin crawl. He was standing near the entrance, and when I walked past him, I felt his gaze follow me. I shrugged it off at first, figuring maybe he was just another shopper. Or perhaps I was just being dramatic. But then, as I moved to the next aisle, I saw him again. It wasn't like we both just happened to be in the same section. He was walking slowly behind me, not far at all. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, his eyes were fixed on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me. I stopped in front of a rack of sweaters, pretending to look at the clothes while I discreetly checked him out. He was holding his phone, and I swear, it looked like he was recording me. Not in the way someone might record a product or something for a quick comparison, but in a very intentional way, like he was focusing solely on me. That's when panic set in, and I felt my heart begin to race. I couldn't just stand there and let this go on, so I decided to move to another store, hoping he'd lose interest. But as soon as I turned the corner in the other store to go down an aisle, there he was again, walking the same path, almost like he knew where I was going. My hands started to sweat. I didn't know what to do. And if it couldn't get any worse, when I tried to call my friends to ask for them to meet me at the mall, my phone had died. I realized that the store I was at was so far from the entrance, and I didn't want to make a scene, especially if I was wrong and blamed someone stalking me when they weren't. So I didn't know what to do. I walked faster, trying to stay calm. I left the store and started walking around while trying to find security, but couldn't. I saw a woman standing near a display. She was just browsing, but as soon as I got closer, she looked up and smiled at me. She asked if I was okay, and almost immediately I told her what was going on. I didn't want to sound like I was overreacting, but I could feel the words slipping out, more out of fear than anything else. She immediately looked over at the man I'd been trying to avoid. I followed her gaze and saw him still hanging around, not far from where we stood. She told me she could see him and that it looked like he was recording me. She gave me a reassuring smile and told me her name was Ashley, and she could walk me to my car if that would make me feel more safe. I was so relieved that someone was offering to help that I didn't hesitate. I told her that would be great and thanked her. We started walking toward the exit, and I could feel the man still behind us. But I wasn't alone anymore. Ashley kept talking, asking me things about my day, where I was from, and if I was in school. Small talk, stuff I didn't really think about, but it kept me distracted. But then, just as we were getting closer to the doors, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My mind was starting to scream that something wasn't right. I didn't know how to explain it, but the more I walked with Ashley, the more I started to notice the small details. For one, she was too calm, too friendly, almost like she was trying to make me comfortable with her. It felt like it wasn't natural. I didn't know if it was my mind making me believe these things because I was already scared or if I was right. I tried not to panic, but I couldn't ignore the gut feeling that something was off. The closer we got to the mall exit, the more I felt like I was being herded, like she was walking me right into their trap. I stopped Ashley and told her that I could walk the rest of the way by myself. As I sped up, she continued to follow me and told me that she needed to go with me to make sure I was safe. As we were almost outside, Ashley caught up to me with a strange look in her eyes. She said it's really dangerous to be out this late, especially as a young girl. She said she would hate to know if something happened to me. That's when it hit me. The smile that had felt so comforting before now felt fake. The way her voice had softened in that last sentence, like she was trying to lure me into something. I turned to look at the man behind us. He was getting closer now. and that's when I saw it. She was holding something in her hand, a small cloth, maybe a rag. I asked her what was in her hand. Ashley's face turned into something that wasn't friendly anymore. It was like a mask slipping off, and I could see the anger in her eyes. Before I could move, she reached for me, trying to grab my arm, but I was too quick. I yanked myself away and bolted for the door. I ran out of the store and into the parking lot. I could hear their footsteps behind me. They were coming after me, but just as I reached the parking lot, a car came speeding toward the aisle I was running through, blocking the path. I didn't know if it was just a coincidence, but I didn't care. I kept running. I looked back to see the man and Ashley behind me stop dead in their tracks. I was almost at my car when I saw the woman in the car pull up on the side of me and roll down her window. With a concerned look, she asked me if I was okay. I wasn't sure whether to trust her, but at that point, I was so terrified that I just needed someone to help me. I stopped running and approached the car cautiously. I told her everything I could as quickly as possible, looking around, trying to see if I saw them again. The woman in the car told me to get in and that she'd drive me to her car. I hesitated for a moment, my brain screaming at me to be careful. It felt weird to trust a stranger, especially after what had just happened. But I didn't have time to think. She then said I didn't have to get in and that she would drive alongside me until I got to my car. I made it into my car and thanked her. She told me to be careful because human trafficking is real, and that's what it sounded like to her. I drove back home that night feeling a little safer, even though the fear still lingered. When I tried to file a police report the next day, I learned there wasn't enough evidence. No one had been able to find the man or the woman. It felt like they just vanished into thin air. Back then, there wasn't a lot of talk about things like human trafficking, at least not like there is now. Ever since then, I never went to any store by myself, and definitely not a mall. I'm not someone who typically tells stories, but what happened that one Black Friday changed me forever. I guess I've been carrying it with me for so long that I need to get it off my chest. This is something I'll never forget. It was the year Cabbage Patch dolls were the thing. Back in the 80s, when those dolls were more than just toys, they were like an obsession. Every kid wanted one, and my daughter, she was no different. She had her heart set on one. I couldn't blame her. They were cute and special. But the thing was, I didn't have the money to buy her a lot of Christmas presents that year. I worked hard, but I barely made enough to cover the bills. I had to choose between paying the rent or getting her a few nice things. But then, that Black Friday sale popped up. I couldn't pass it up. I'm sure you remember how big those dolls were at the time. Huge lines, crazed parents, the stores packed. Toys R Us was going to have a massive sale, and the only thing I wanted was one of those dolls for my little girl. I knew this was her big chance to get one, so I decided I was going to do whatever it took. I showed up early. I didn't have the luxury of waiting until later because I knew how insane it could get. I was at the store before sunrise, standing in line outside with a bunch of other moms and dads. I knew I had to be one of the first in line to get my hands on that doll. I remember looking around at the people standing there. Some were bundled up, others chatting nervously, already talking about how they'd fight for the dolls once the doors opened. It was already getting tense just standing out there, but I kept thinking about my daughter, how much she wanted that doll, how much it would mean to her. I had to do this. When the store finally opened its doors, that's when things got crazy. People surged forward, all racing towards where the doll display was. I was one of the first to get in, but that didn't matter. The crowd had already become wild. People were yelling, pushing, and shoving. Some were trampling others, not caring who they hurt in the process. It was like the world had gone mad for a doll. I wasn't ready for how violent it would get. As I made my way toward the display where the dolls were, I could hear the chaos behind me, footsteps pounding, voices shouting. I remember thinking how insane it was that grown adults would be acting like this. I finally made it to the Cabbage Patch dolls. They were sitting on display, surrounded by frantic people trying to grab them. Dolls were being thrown around and knocked off the shelves. The place was a mess, like a tornado had passed through it. I saw a doll on the floor and rushed towards it. But before I could grab it, two other women, who seemed to be together, reached for the same one. We all reached for it at the same time. In a flash, I had it in my hands. But these women weren't about to give up that easily. One of them tried to yank it out of my hands. I wasn't going to let that happen, though. I wasn't going to leave that store without it. I jerked the doll back, and before I knew it, the two women were trying to pull me to the ground. They were screaming at me, calling me all sorts of names, trying to wrestle the doll away from me. I fought back, desperate to hold on to it. Somehow, I managed to break free. I grabbed the doll and ran as fast as I could to the register, not looking back, not caring who I knocked over along the way. All I could think about was getting out of that nightmare, but the two women didn't stop. They followed me, all the way to the checkout counter. When I got there, they started accusing me of stealing the doll, saying I had taken it from them. My heart was pounding, I was sweating, but I just stayed calm. The cashier looked at us for a second, and then she said, "I got to the checkout first, so it's mine." The women started shouting at me, calling me a thief, yelling curses. They were standing right there, watching me pay. And I swear, I could feel their eyes on the back of my neck the whole time. But the cashier was firm. She told them to leave, and when she said that, they finally backed off. Though not without making it clear they weren't finished with me. I left the store with the doll, my heart still pounding. I felt like I'd won something huge, something I'd worked so hard for. But my relief didn't last long. When I walked back to my car, those same women were waiting for me in the parking lot. I didn't see them at first, but I turned around just in time to see one of them holding a gun. A pistol. It was pointed right at me. The woman with the gun threatened that if I didn't give them the doll, she was going to shoot me. I tried to talk my way out of it, but the woman held the gun low so others couldn't see it and began poking me with it, telling me to hurry up. Then the woman from the register shouted at them to leave me alone. She didn't see the gun until the woman pointed it at her and shot. Everyone that was in the parking lot ran, and even some people from the store ran outside to their cars. It all happened so fast. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then, the two women turned and ran. They didn't even hesitate. They grabbed the Cabbage Patch doll from my arms, and in the chaos of it all, they disappeared into the night. I got on the ground with the woman while another employee called the ambulance. People scattered, running in all directions. The ambulance came, and they managed to save the cashier. It's so crazy to think how quickly things turned from a simple shopping trip to something violent. Terrifying. I found out later the two women were caught. The week of Christmas came around, and I was at a loss because I paid for the doll that I never got back. That was until the cashier found where I lived and came to my house. She told me that she assumed I had a daughter based on me buying the cabbage doll. She gifted me the doll and some other toys for my daughter for Christmas. She and I became friends that day, and we still are now. We even spend Christmas together sometimes and go shopping for Black Friday.